Preface. Economics is an important branch of studies that deals with the rules, principles and laws governing the economy of a nation and different parts of the world. Economics is the study and an analysis of how individuals, businesses and populations use money or other resources in order to produce wealth. It is important to understand the concepts and basics of economics for state, federal and local government, and even for companies that are affected by them. Business professionals and economics professionals must know the exact working of economics to be able to advise companies and clients in businesses and the students in an academic setting. Economic growth may be defined as an increase in economy capacity to manufacture goods and services within a given period of time. In simple terms, economic growth suggests any long-term expansion of growth and productive potential of an economy and its ability to satisfy the demands and wants of the natives. Sustained economic growth has a great impact on the nation's national income and also on the level of employment. Summary. The principles of basic economics affect and guide the market scenario, the government policies, and societies at large. Economics is basically the study of those scarce resources having alternative uses and how to allocate them to get the maximum output. Some of the resources include land and labor, capital and natural resource. Economics has nothing to do with making a moral judgment, but is more about mathematical calculation and doesn't explain a love or doesn't talk about emotion. Market economics makes use of price to allocate the scarce resources. Individuals bid higher for those goods that are useful to them, and it even connects market participants in the complex network, thereby helping to avoid the market coordinator. Consumers and producers can ignore why things get more expensive or cheaper. The buying decision can simply be taken on the basis of the price. So prices tend to guide the buyer's intention. Prices affect demand and also offer financial incentives such as profits and losses that in turn affect behavior in using the resources. If there is any loss due to a lack of demand, the producer stops producing it altogether or reduces the volume of production. The producers then shift resources to productive activities from the wasteful ones. Profit incurred by a company or organization is like the cost which a society bears in return for efficiency. People do better jobs that give more earnings only when they have some personal incentive to fare well and do better. Consumers, on the other hand, buy more when the price of items is less, and they buy less when the price is more. Similarly, producers produce more when the prices are high in comparison to when the prices are lower. Just like any of the resources, capital also flows towards the most productive uses. However, capital investment projects are restricted when the investment laws are complex. Each and every resource has several uses, and economics revolve around making effective use of it. The end product is as per the demands of the consumers. For instance, there is no use of baking delicious cakes when the consumers demand cookies and bread rolls. If the product in demand is scarce, a shortage is created. People then desire to consume more of that product, and so the price increases. On the other hand, when the demand for a certain product is less and the supply is more, a surplus will exist. Economics is also about understanding certain incentives moving along with using the resources. In economics, a truly open market is the market where the buyers and sellers interact freely in order to fulfill their needs, demands, and wants. Here, the incentive will be to manufacture the items that have more demand from the buyer's front. If this is accomplished, then a profit is made. The profit earned by the company is the reward the company gets for supplying products as per the demand. What matters is manipulating the open market to incentivize people to act in a certain way. Some of the incentives in an open market are discounts, price cut-offs, price fixing, price rise, taxing, and subsidizing. These all incentives are present in the open market. If any process or product is taxed, there will be less of manufacturing since the product is costly. This is so because money is the driving force which facilitates the production or distribution of wealth. As it is difficult to barter goods and services, money is the chief medium of exchange, acting as an intermediary. With money, you may exchange apples and chairs and can also divide into several small units. The government of any state or nation enforces rules such as property rights to allow the market transactions to take place. The government also plays an important role in guarding all negative externalities of various transactions. Basic economics also revolves around international trade and how it is not just about zero-sum game. International trade is not at all about one nation being a winner and another loser. When both nations have some gains, they enter into trade relations, or else it makes no sense at all. The countries don't need to fight for jobs, as they can create more job opportunities by becoming prosperous. Trade is helpful owing to the comparative or absolute advantage. Free trade has a comparative advantage for the countries and can import or export goods with a no-tariff barrier. Free trade generally allows low prices for customers, more and more exports, offers more choice of goods while benefiting from economies of scale. Removing tariffs can lower the price of goods for the consumers. There are different schools of thoughts with respect to economics. One of the popular thoughts is incentivizing people such that they care for themselves through free market or open market. Second is having government entity care where the government takes all the major decisions. Societies allowing free trades prosper more. Capitalism or open market of free trade, they are all the same. When setting any of the economic policies, it is important to comprehend inherent trade-offs, the incentives and consequences of the policy, whereas the intention behind the policy take a back seat. It is important to weigh a policy before implementing it. If this is not done, then the policy may have a disastrous effect on the economy. Income and wealth distribution statistics can be misleading, as the poorer section may be the younger workers who will rise higher in due course of time. Then, the household income may be misleading for the size of any household changes from time to time. Thus, the per capita income fluctuates and is not stagnant. Similarly, the income of the household may also decrease with the reducing household size. The unemployment rate may be misleading for the people who are looking for jobs. They are also included in the list of unemployed people. Basic economics talk about all these factors. Economics is mainly divided into microeconomics and macroeconomics. While in microeconomics, one study about the economic behavior of a particular individual, in macroeconomics, the economic behavior of large aggregate is considered like the total production, the total consumption, total savings, and investment. Chapter 1. Basics of Economics. Understand the basics. For the ones who have no idea about economics, they usually feel that economics is a difficult and complex subject filled with a whole lot of ambiguous details and terms, difficult to explain. Simply put, economics is an efficient use of scarce resources having alternative uses and its study, the way to allocating those. The resources must be allocated in such a way that it maximizes the output. To allocate scarce resources, the market economy makes use of pricing. Well, still the subject is so complex that economists find it difficult to explain and what it is. Economics is the study of incentives rather than simply talking about business and money. It talks about the allocation of scarce resources like land, labor, capital, and natural resources. When it comes to the resources, there is never sufficient resource to satisfy all. Trade-off should be made on the societal and on an individual level. The central question surrounding economics is how to make efficient use of scarce resources. For example, on a battlefield, when there are hundreds of soldiers wounded, there is never enough medical resource or team of doctors to treat them all. What one can do is save the ones who are seriously wounded or need urgent treatment and let others survive without urgent care who don't need it. This is the way the resources should be allocated to get the maximum output. How to utilize a country's resource to get maximum outputs is an economic problem and a question which is difficult to answer. An efficient allocation of a country's resources is important from the point of the country's wealth. There are many nations who have rich natural resources, but still they are poor. Similarly, there are nations with poor natural resources but are counted as wealthy nations. Economics is also the study of causes and effects. It is important to come up with economic policies to judge through their incentives and consequences rather than the motivations and goals. A policy which seems a well-meaning policy can have bad consequences or unintended consequences at times buried in the second or third order consequences. Prices have a very important role to play in the economy as it affects the demand and supply. It determines the way of allocating resources. The market economy plays a significant role in allocating resources. However, the best way would be the central authority taking a stance on what to do with the resource. In the feudal system, the lord only says what to do, what to grow, and the ways to sell. In this manner, only the Soviet Union operated. The government determined the amount of steel to be produced in Bulgaria and what quantity of wheat to grow in Ukraine. But there is again a problem. The economy is very complex. There are thousands of products and services, and so an efficient allocation of these items among millions of people is really difficult. Then, the counterproductive incentive is also an important factor to be considered. Therefore, instead of the central authority, price factor is used to allocate the scarce resource. Each producer and consumer transacts on a micro level with another individual, and there are terms they agree on. These terms of transactions are governed by prices. Thus, the parties keep track of only a few prices that are important to their transactions or the decision-making process. There is no need to take into consideration the prices of all the commodities in an economy. No matter how complex the reality, everything is summarized or rather simplified in just a singular number called the price. The transaction prices have a sort of ripple effect all through the economy of a country. When one price pervades in one sector, it is transmitted to another sector as well. There isn't any need for this pricing to pass through the central authority. The price of the resource only determines what quantity of that resource will be utilized in a particular sector. On the flip side, if someone else produces the same item at a cheaper rate and the quality is also better, the price gets easily transmitted to the related sectors. The consumers directly act on without any need for the authority to intervene. There is a way in which price allocates natural and man-made resources. Prices offer profit and loss or financial incentive to affect the way in which the resources are utilized or the way the resulting products are used. If there is a profit, it motivates the people to produce more of such products. Profit is always the focus and aim of so-called greedy capitalists. Similar to this, when there are losses, it forbids the manufacturer from producing an item which brings about losses. Losses help to avoid inefficient use of countries' resources. So the resources are used somewhere else where they may bring about profit or better output. It is always the aim of the producer to to manufacture maximum units of the items that bring about profit. He bids higher and higher for that unit till there is a loss. When the producer does this continuously, there will be a time when he reaches the ceiling in consumer demand and the consumers are unwilling to procure the same item. Then the producer stops making it. As a result of this, there is a natural equilibrium and the manufacturers or producers simply bid for certain resources to meet the demands of the consumers. When this practice goes on, the valuable resources move to their valued usage automatically. Chapter 2. The role of GDP and how it impacts the economy of a nation. Economic growth is directly related to the growth and development of a nation. When there is economic growth in the nation, it implies an increase in the country's capacity to manufacture more goods and services in the given period of time. When there is a long-term expansion of the productive potential of an economy, there is an economic growth to satisfy the needs of the consumers of the society. If there is sustained economic growth in the economy, it has a positive impact on the level of employment generated and the country's national income. These all factors result to the higher living standard. Economic growth also stimulates government finances as it enhances tax revenue. It increases the income of the government that may further be utilized for economic growth and development. Tax revenue is extra income for the government which needs to be utilized efficiently. The level of economic growth of the nation may be evaluated by comparing gross national product of the current year with the gross national product of the last year. It is important to analyze the strength and weakness to pave the way for economic growth. Economic analysis is important for it offers an insight into the economy of the nation and its essentials. GDP, or gross domestic product, calculates the value of the goods and services of a country at market prices. It does not take into consideration the income from other sources and abroad. In the United States of America, for instance, GDP is released every 3 months. GDP is an important factor that helps to gauge the health of the economy. As GDP is an important factor from the point of the country's economy, the government officials and analysts pay important attention to it. The figure helps to analyze an economy and what are the growth prospects. The systematic process helps to find out the ways of making the optimum use of scarce resources. It also helps in the selection of an alternative to accomplish the economic goals. An important reason for analyzing a country's economy is assessing the cause of the economic problem, including the cause of inflation, economic depression, and overall economic instability. These all are done by considering the several economic variables like the demand and supply, the pricing factor, the wages, the labor, production cost, and the capital. When there is a positive change in the level of commodities, goods and services produced, it is known as economic growth. However, economic growth is never uniform and does not remain the same for all the sectors of an economy. It may be that the telecommunication sector of the nation performs well at same point in time, while the mining sector underperforms at that point in time only. Economic growth is directly associated to the percentage increase of the gross national product of the nation. In other words, when there is an increase in the per capita national income of the nation, or if the net national product of the nation stays constant for a sustained period of time, there is economic growth. The key is that the growth must be constant or sustained for a certain time period. When there is an increase in the output of the nation, and this is more than the increase in the population, there is economic growth. GDP figure is also used by a businessman to determine if the business will expand or contract. Acting as a major planning tool, a business person can take GDP into consideration and decide whether to hire more employees and whether the business will grow or not. To ensure this, the GDP of the last year must be compared with the current year's GDP. Growth in GDP must be taken as a positive sign, and if it shrinks, then the business may not focus on expansion. GDP data can also impact the currency value, which may either appreciate or depreciate. If the US GDP for the current year shrinks in comparison to the last year, it will take more US dollars to buy British currency, and vice versa. The government takes into consideration the GDP of the nation prior to undertaking any policy, since it again impacts the economic performance of the nation. If the GDP is low, the government will change the policies and embark on some other policies. Increasing and decreasing GDP also impacts the interest rate. This interest rate is the rate which is charged on the loans. In the United States of America, the basic interest rate is set by the Federal Reserve. Any rise in the GDP implies an improvement in the country's economy. The growth of GDP also suggests that people spend more money to make purchases, and they are capable. The government can rise the interest rate at this point in time to prevent inflation. This way, money is supplied scarcely. But when the GDP shrinks, the government lowers the interest rate so that it gets easier for people to borrow money to meet expenses. The economic growth of a nation may get severely affected by the trade deficit, any change or alteration in expenses by government bodies made. If there is a sharp rise in the price of commodities, the economy of the nation suffers severely. Smaller countries bear debt crises when there is political instability or profligate government, poor economy, or similar factors. Chapter 3. Importance of economic growth and the factors affecting it. Economic growth implies an increase in real gross domestic product. An increase in the real gross domestic product means an increase in national output value and the national expenditure. It is the phase that indicates an increase in real GDP, increase in the market value of commodities and services that are inflation adjusted in the given period of time, and is measured conventionally as the increase in the real GDP. If there is economic growth, it suggests a good time for the nation. This growth may also result from an increase in income of the people of the nation. The rate at which the gross domestic product changes in a period of time is the basis of calculation of economic growth. There can be either an increase in the number of goods and services produced by a nation or decrease of it from the last year calculations. When the attained figure is negative, it suggests a phase of economic depression. It is also referred to as economic recession or negative growth. An increase in GDP is necessary, for it suggests economic growth and is beneficial. Economic growth is necessary with regards to an improvement in the living standard. So the rate of poverty automatically declines when the standard of living improves. There will be fewer numbers of people falling below the poverty line or the lower income group. Developing nations and undeveloped nations have to struggle too much to ward off poverty, as most of the people are poor. The only way to improve the living standard and ward off poverty is economic growth. The government needs to take measures to curb poverty and to bring about economic growth. Economic growth creates more jobs and employment opportunities. When jobs and employment are more, people can earn for their livelihood. On the other hand, businesses and firms can produce more output, hire more people to work in the organization to meet the production demands. People can enjoy better living standards by procuring more number of goods and services. Right in the 20th century, economic growth was a contributing factor towards reducing poverty and improving the standards of living. As a result of this, there was an increase in the life expectancy. Positive economic growth and higher output generate employment, as already stated, and there is also lower government borrowing. Economic growth generates more and more tax revenues that may be collected by the government and utilized for the betterment. When the tax revenue increases, the government needs to spend less money on certain benefits like unemployment benefits and others. Thus, economic growth reduces directly the government borrowing. It also plays a crucial role in reducing the debt to GDP ratio. In the post-war period, economic growth helped UK to reduce debt to GDP ratio. The government can spend more money on public welfare by collecting more taxes, such as on education and NHS, when there is growth in GDP. When the real GDP is high, the government can spend money on safeguarding our environment also, use a country's resources to promote the recycling of goods or increase the use of renewable energy sources. The firms and organizations can also invest money in future growth and progress or to meet their future needs and demands. When the investment increases, there is economic growth further, and thus the virtuous circle of growth and investment is automatically created. Economic growth is more important for developing countries and for sub-Saharan Africa, for it allows the nation to escape the level of poverty. It improves the standard of living, the life expectancy, even if there is a slight economic growth. But not always it suggests betterment of people, for the nature of the growth holds significance. It may be that certain measures adopted by the government for economic progress lead to more pollution or congestion. In such a situation, the living standard won't improve that much. There are many factors affecting the economic growth of a country. They are: human resources. This is the most important determining factor of economic growth. The quantity or quality of human resources available determines the economic growth of a country. When it comes to the quality of human resource, one takes into consideration the creative ability, the skill level of the human resource, the education, and the training. If a nation's human resource is extremely trained, skilled, and educated, then obviously the output will be of high standard. But if there is a lack of skilled labourers, this will hamper the growth and progress of a nation. Natural resources. Natural resources also impact the economic growth or progress of a nation. Natural resources mean the resources procured from nature or from beneath the land. Some of the land-based resources are landscape, water resources, and the plants. The underground resources are natural gas, coal, metals, oil, and minerals. Those countries that have plenty of natural and land-based resources, they enjoy significant economic growth and prosperity. Capital formation. This involves power, land, building, machinery, and all the medium of communication. Acquiring or producing such man-made resources are referred to as capital formation. If there is more capital formation, it means there is more availability of capital for the workers. This, in turn, contributes to an increase in the capital per labour ratio. When there is an increase in capital per labour ratio, the productivity of labour increases to contribute to economic growth. Technological advancement. When there is technological advancement, there is economic growth. Improvement in technology improves production methods, production techniques, and hence the quality of output. In short, the nation's prosperity, its progress, is dependent on the economy. More and more fertile land, talented and skilled labourers, more entrepreneurs capable of taking investment risks, and the availability of abundant capital resources contribute to the prosperity of a nation. Chapter 4. Top 5 countries with the best economy in the entire world. Before one tries to find the names of top 5 countries with the best economy, it is wise to know what actually a good economy entails. The decision cannot be taken on the basis of GDP per capita or those having the largest economies. If one considers only the larger economies and great GDP per capita, then it may hide several pointers in the form of economic issues. It may be that a country has a very large economy, but that is solely due to a huge population, which is again a drawback. If a nation has a large economy, it doesn't always mean that it is powerful. China, for instance, has a large economy and is set to take over the USA in the coming years, but it struggles with a lower per capita income and with the problem of a huge population. The USA is the largest economic superpower, but suffers from bloated healthcare, education system, and a high insurance cost. Qatar has the highest GDP per capita, but again, the government spending, the natural resource, sustainable GDP level might change to a drastic level in future. This same applies to many other countries. It is therefore important to name the best economies of the world only after considering factors such as high GDP per capita, along with the ability to sustain that. An ability to maintain a growth economy for a consistent period holds importance from the nation's point of view, since the stock market is ever changing. Government policies, the set of institutions and other factors determine the country's productivity level. The varied phases of economic cycles tend to toss the economy of the world around. The most competitive economies are Switzerland, ranked as the top economy in the world. Switzerland has the top economy and the most competitive one across the globe for the past 8 consecutive years. Since the year 2009, Switzerland has the most competitive economy in the world. Its infrastructure is the top 5 in the entire world. Then, it is the second most creative and innovative nations as per the recent research conducted in universities and institutes. Switzerland has nearly 325 patents per 1 million people. Switzerland is just behind Japan in this respect. Besides, the elementary level school, the high school and the middle school system are ranked as the best. The nation has some of the best boarding schools. Singapore, a strong and advanced economy. The tiny city, Singapore, has a strong and much advanced economy. As per the World Economic Forum, Singapore is the second best economy and is the 6th year. Factors like workers' training, higher education and health of the labour market contribute to making Singapore as the second best economy. The world's best economies. Top 5 listed here. United States of America. Nominal GDP 19.39 trillion and GDP PPP $19.39 trillion. The USA is indeed the world's largest economy, currently since the year 1871. The size of the US economy in 2017 was whopping $19.39 trillion. By the year 2018, it was expected that the economy would reach $20.41 trillion. The United States of America is referred to as an economic superpower for many good reasons. The economy of US is a quarter of the entire world's economy. The US whopping economy is also backed by advanced technology, a fabulous infrastructure, and there is an abundance of natural resources. Its economy is mostly service-oriented and contributes to nearly 80% of the GDP. The manufacturing sector of USA only contributes 15% of the output. When the economy is judged on the basis of the purchasing power, the United States loses its top position and is just after China. The Chinese economy for 2017 was $23.26 trillion. But this gap in the economy, or the difference, is sure to fade by the year 2023. It is projected that the USA economy will grow up to $24.53 trillion by the year 2023. China, experiencing exponential growth. In the past few years and decades, China has experienced amazing growth in the economy and thereby breaking the barrier of closed and centrally planned economy. China has now evolved into a leading manufacturing and an exporting nation in the entire world. This is why China is addressed as world's factory, owing to its huge manufacturing potential and the export ability. In the past few years, there has been a sharp increase in the role of the service in contrast to manufacturing, and so there is a decline in the country's GDP. In the 1980s, China was the seventh largest economy, having the GDP of around $305.35 billion, whereas the USA was $2.86 trillion. 1978 market reforms contributed to economic growth, coming around to 10% on an average. By 2023, China is expected to reach GDP of $37.06 trillion. But then its huge population brings down the GDP per capita. Japan. Nominal GDP $4.87 trillion and GDP PPP $5.42 trillion. When it comes to GDP, Japan is the third largest economy. In the year 2017, its GDP was $4.87 trillion, and it crossed $5 trillion in the year 2018. From 2008 to 2017, it has been a challenging time for the Japan economy. The global crisis has caused a recession, which again led to bad domestic demand followed by public debt. Japan was improving its economy, and there was a sign of progress when a massive earthquake took place. This was again a setback for the Japan economy. This hit Japan both socially and economically. In the year 2020, Japan economy will certainly improve with the Olympic Games to be held in Japan. Japan's GDP, from $5.16 trillion, is sure to increase in the coming years. Germany. Nominal GDP $3.68 trillion and GDP PPP $4.17 trillion. Germany is the strongest and the largest of Europe's economy. In terms of nominal GDP, Germany is the fourth largest economy with $3.68 trillion GDP. When it comes to the purchasing power parity, Germany's GDP is $4.17 trillion and per capita GDP is $44,549.69, holding the 17th place. In the year 1980, Germany used to be the third largest economy in terms of GDP, coming around to $850.47. However, the capital good export suffered a setback in 2008. The economy of the nation grew by 2.5% in 2017. There can be a downward trend in 2020 by 2.1%. The nation needs to revise its potential for manufacturing in the present global scenario. United Kingdom with nominal GDP $2.62 trillion and GDP PPP $2.91 trillion. The United Kingdom, having the GDP of $2.62 trillion, is the fifth largest economy. When you compare this in terms of the GDP and PPP, United Kingdom moves to the ninth spot with a GDP of $2.91 trillion. When it comes to GDP per capita, the United Kingdom ranks 23rd, having $39,734.99 in the world. During 2018, the nominal GDP of UK was $2.96 trillion, but then it is sure to move up to the seventh position in 2023. UK GDP may rise to $3.47 trillion. Right from 1992 to 2008, the UK economy witnesses an upward trend. The economy shrunk by nearly 6% during 2008 and at the start of 2009. India. Nominal GDP $2.61 trillion and GDP PPP $9.45 trillion. Among all the nations, India is the fastest growing economy and occupies the sixth position in the world economy with a GDP $2.61 trillion. It is estimated that India will become the fifth largest economy by 2021, taking over the United Kingdom. When one talks about the purchasing power of the nation in terms of GDP, then India ranks third. However, India's huge population drags down the nominal GDP per capita to somewhat around $1,982. The growth rate is expected to rise by 7.5% in the year 2019 and 2020 with the introduction of Currency Exchange Initiative and GST. India's agriculture contribution is still higher than other nations, even when it has declined by 17% in the past few years. The strength of India's economy is all due to the self-reliance and limited imports, favourable demographics and higher saving rate. Over the past few years, the standard of living of middle-class people has also risen. Chapter 5. A general concept of inflation and deflation. Simply put, inflation is the rise in the price of commodities and services. When people have more money and the volume of production is less, people bid for higher prices. Economic cycles have to go through inflation and deflation phase, and also the period of stagnation. Both inflation and deflation have an effect on the economy of the nation. There may be long phases of recession and depression in an economy resulting from this. When there is a fall in the prices of goods and services, there is deflation, while inflation is just the opposite of it. During the inflation phase, the supply of money is more, and so there is a loss of value of money. As a result of this, more money is circulated, and so the currencies lose the purchasing power. The reason behind inflation are given below. A rise in the price of goods and services. Government officials create more money just to increase wealth and spending. This is a subtle yet an opaque change. Voters tend to dislike taxes and hence reduce the output. All these factors increase the price rates. During the phase of the war, the government may increase the supply of currency instead of increasing the tax. Additional money is used to procure the country's output, and so the consumer goods become scarce. At times, inflation also results from money backed by gold. The government does not issue more currency, but rather increase the use of gold or items of limited supply. However, it is an effective measure to keep inflation or deflation in the narrow limit. But an increase in the supply of gold might result in an increase in price. Doubling the supply of money can increase the investment on asset while make people lose their faith in the money. This can again cause inflation. Deflation is a decrease in commodity prices. When there is less supply of money in comparison to the output, the period is the deflation phase. Deflation poses a serious threat to the country's economy. This is so because the debt is fixed and deflation can cause an increase in the amount of debt. A debt of $1,000 that began 5 years ago might cost now $1,300 due to deflation. This debt amount is directly proportional to the purchasing power, which has actually increased in the last 5 years, thereby increasing Conclusion. The basic problem an economy faces is deciding what to produce and for whom to produce. Another problem is how much to produce and how to produce using limited resources. There can be two ways of producing commodities. That is, it may be capital incentive or labor incentive. The economic system should be able to answer to such basic questions. Well, different economic systems have different methods of proceeding and different views. Solving a set of questions and problems by using customs and traditions is non-existent. The capitalist economic system solves these questions through the market forces of demand and supply, the pricing factor, government policies, and law and order. Economics is pretty rigorous, for the data is used to solve and gain outcome for contradictory theories. But again, there is a lack of ability to conduct experiments that in turn reduces repeatability and precision. In the 20th century, The equilibrium theory gained prominence to illustrate complex interdependency of many economic activities. Even if the real world is hardly in equilibrium, there are several economic theories to illustrate what can happen in the state of disequilibrium. The central problem of an economy is how to allocate scarce resources to get the maximum output. The resources should be allocated in a way that it satisfies the wants of people. Wants are many, but resources are limited. Here in comes the role of basic economics, which seeks to bring about equilibrium in demand and supply, resource and wants. Basic economics is all about solving the problems like what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. As people have unlimited wants, but the resources are scarce, basic economics is completely dedicated to exploring ways of efficiently distributing limited resources in order to meet as many wants as possible.